couple of months ago, I had one of the best days of my life. I woke up early, worked out, got my schoolwork done before school started, had a productive day of online learning, scored very high on a math team test, and filmed my first YouTube video. Beyond all my material accomplishments, I also had this inner sense of happiness and the feeling that nobody could stop me from being happy. However, when I woke up the next day, things were different. I had woken up early again, but I wasn't motivated, I wasn't productive, and most importantly, I wasn't feeling that same sense of happiness within me. As I went to bed that night, two questions were running through my mind. What makes us happy? And how can we change our actions in order to ensure happiness? So for the next few days, I hunted for ways to find happiness in our lives on the internet, but nothing really seemed to click. I was getting a bunch of tips and tricks on how to temporarily boost our happiness. But what I really wanted was a lifestyle shift that would enable me to be happier for longer periods of time. I was on the verge of giving up, but one day I stumbled upon a research study from the 1980s that claimed to have the key to happiness. Intrigued, I decided to look into it to see if there was anything valuable. So it turns out in the 1980s, a psychologist by the name Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi decided to interview a bunch of top athletes, musicians, and entrepreneurs to see if all these people had anything in common. It turns out that all these happy and successful people are really good at getting themselves into a state of being called flow. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is flow? Well, according to Csikszentmihalyi, flow is a state of being in which you're so involved in one task that nothing else seems to matter. In fact, you'll continue to do this task, even at a great personal cost, just for the sheer sake of doing it. Let's talk about some examples of flow. If you're an athlete, being in flow is like being in the zone, where you can't seem to miss a shot or make a mistake. If you've ever read a book for 5 hours straight without realizing it, you likely entered a state of flow. If you've been studying for finals over the past few weeks, you've likely entered a state of flow in a particularly intense or productive study session. Finally, if you've ever binged watched a TV series, you've likely entered a state of flow as well. Now, let's talk about some of the benefits of flow. According to a study done by McKinsey & Company and the Flow Genome Project in 2012, flow has the ability to increase our productivity levels by up to 500% and our creativity levels by up to 700%. This means that we could theoretically get all of our week's work done on Monday itself while in a state of flow. Think about all the extra time that gives us to focus on things that truly matter to us. Additionally, flow has the ability to increase our happiness levels. According to Csikszentmihalyi, people who are in a state of flow are completely in the present moment, which increases their happiness levels as well. Additionally, he found that people who spend the majority of their life in flow states have increased perceived levels of happiness within their lives than people who don't spend time in flow. I've experienced all these benefits firsthand on my special day, and it turns out that I was feeling really happy because I was in a flow state for the majority of my day. By now, I hope I've convinced you of the benefits of flow, because it's time to get into how we can actually put ourselves into flow states. So there's really only two things we need to do to put ourselves into a flow state. Set the right goal and eliminate all distractions. So let's talk about the first one. Being in flow is all about maintaining focus, but it's hard to put our focus on something if we don't choose the right goal to focus our attention on. Let's take a look at a chart that will help show us how we can set the proper goals for ourselves. On the x-axis, we have our skill level, and on the y-axis, we have our perceived challenge. Now, there's three main regions for goals. On the bottom right, we have boredom, where we have a high skill level but a low challenge. These are tasks like scrolling through our Instagram feed for many hours or folding the laundry. On the top left, we have anxiety-filled tasks, where we have a low skill but a high challenge. These are tasks like trying to learn calculus without first having mastered algebra, or trying to run a marathon with no prior training. Finally, in the middle, we have our flow state, in which our skill levels match our challenge level. Activities that are in flow include creating YouTube videos, listening to music, playing video games, or meditating. Let's talk about how we can change an anxiety filled goal, such as running a marathon, into a flow state goal. The easiest way to do this is to change the challenge level of our goal. So let's say we want to run a marathon. Obviously, we're not going to be conditioned to run a marathon in our first try. So we start by setting a low goal of running a mile. So we start running miles, and then we get really good at running the mile. So we decide to increase our challenge. So now we start running 2 miles. We get really good at that, and then we increase it to 5 miles, running half a marathon, and finally running a full marathon. This is how we can keep our goals and ourselves within the flow state. So the two main questions you should be asking yourself when setting goals is, what is my skill level, and how can I change my challenge in order to match my skill level? These two questions will set us up for success to get into a flow state. While making goals gives us something to focus on, it's also hard to maintain this focus if we're constantly being bombarded by messages on our phone or being interrupted by our younger sibling. Distraction is the enemy of flow, and if we're unable to eliminate our distractions, we're going to have a very difficult time putting ourselves into a state of flow. Luckily for most of us, our biggest source of distraction is our phone, and it's really easy to eliminate this distraction. Simply turn your phone off and put it in another room. While this is a huge sacrifice for us to make, me included, it's necessary to put ourselves into flow states. It's also easy to do this once we realize that flow states are ultimately going to make us happier. So now I've told you about what flow is, how it makes us happy, and how we can put ourselves into flow states. So I challenge you to put yourself into a flow state in the coming week. While it might seem difficult at first, being in flow state is like building a muscle. The more you put yourself into flow states, the easier it gets. My final message to you: have fun, stay happy, and get into flow. Thank you.